There once lived a gentleman and his wife, who were the parents of a lovely little daughter. When this child was only 9 years of age, her mother fell sick. Finding her death coming on, she called her child to her and said to her, "My child, always be good. Bear everything that comes to you with patience, and whatever evil and troubles you may suffer, you will be happy in the end if you are so." Then the poor lady died, and her daughter was full of great grief at the loss of a mother so good and kind. The father, too, was unhappy, but he sought to get rid of his sorrow by marrying another wife, and he looked out for some prudent lady who might be a second mother to his child and a companion to himself. His choice fell on a widow lady of a proud and tyrannical temper, who had 2 daughters by a former marriage, both as haughty and bad-tempered as their mother. No sooner was the wedding over than the stepmother began to show her bad temper. She could not bear her stepdaughter's good qualities, that only showed up her daughter's unamiable ones still more obviously, and she accordingly compelled the poor girl to do all the drudgery of the household. It was she who washed the dishes, and scrubbed down the stairs, and polished the floors in my lady's chamber, and in those of the 2 pert misses, her daughters. And while the latter slept on good feather beds in elegant rooms, furnished with full-length looking-glasses, their sister lay in a wretched garret on an old straw mattress. Yet the poor thing bore this ill treatment very meekly, and did not dare complain to her father, who thought so much of his wife that he would only have scolded her. When her work was done, she used to sit in the chimney corner amongst the cinders, which had caused the nickname of Cinderella to be given her by the family. Yet, for all her shabby clothes, Cinderella was 100 times prettier than her sisters, let them be dressed ever so magnificently. The poor little cinder wench! This harsh stepmother was a sore trial to her, and how often, as she sat sadly by herself, did she feel that there is no mother like our own, the dear parent whose flesh and blood we are, and who bears all our little cares and sorrows tenderly, as in the apple of her eye. It happened that the king's son gave a ball, to which he invited all the nobility, and as our 2 young ladies made a great figure in the world, they were included in the list of invitations. So they began to be very busy choosing what headdress and which gown would be the most becoming. Here was fresh work for poor Cinderella, for it was she, forsooth, who was to starch and get up their ruffles, and iron all their fine linen, and nothing but dress was talked about for days together. "I," said the eldest, "shall put on my red velvet dress with my point lace trimmings." "And I," said the younger sister, "shall wear my usual petticoat, but shall set it off with my gold brocaded train and my circlet of diamonds." They sent for a clever tire-woman to prepare the double rows of quilling for their caps, and they purchased a quantity of fashionably cut patches. They called in Cinderella to take her advice, as she had such good taste, and Cinderella not only advised them well, but offered to dress their hair, which they were pleased to accept. While she was thus busied, the sister said to her, "And pray, Cinderella, would you like to go to the ball?" "Nay, you are mocking me," replied the poor girl. "It is not for such as I to go to balls." "True enough," rejoined they. "Folks would laugh to see a Cinderella at a court ball." These 2 stepsisters were very cruel to Cinderella, and ill-used her much. Ah, what sweet friends are our own born sisters! There can be no substitutes like them in the whole wide world. Any other but Cinderella would have dressed their hair awry to punish them for their impertinence, but she was so good-natured that she dressed them most becomingly, although they disdained her, and while they would themselves make a great figure in the world, sought to degrade and lower her. See how the lovely disposition of Cinderella shines out. Although she was not allowed to go to the ball of the king's son, she not only advised them well how they could array themselves to appear to the best advantage, but she even, what greatness of heart to do that, with her own hands dresses their hair, and in the most becoming manner her delicate taste can suggest. The two sisters were so delighted that they scarcely ate a morsel for a couple of days. They spent their whole time before a looking-glass, and they would be laced so tight to make their waists as slender as possible that more than a dozen stay-laces were broken in the attempt. The long-wished-for evening came at last, and these proud misses stepped into the carriage and drove away to the palace. Cinderella looked after the coach as far as she could see, and then returned to the kitchen in tears, where for the first time she bewailed her hard and cruel degradation. She continued sobbing in the corner of the chimney, until a rapping at the kitchen door roused her, and she got up to see what had occasioned it. She found a little old beggar-woman hobbling on crutches, who besought her to give her some food. "I have only part of my own supper for you, Goody, which is no better than a dry crust. But if you like to step in and warm yourself, you can do so, and welcome." "Thank you, my dear," said the old woman in a feeble, croaking voice. She then hobbled in and took her seat by the fire. "Hey, dearie me, what are all these tears, my child?" said the old woman. And then Cinderella told the old woman all her griefs, how her sisters had gone to the ball, and how she wished to go too, but had no clothes or means to do so. "But you shall go, my darling," said the old woman, "or I am not Queen of the Fairies, or your godmother. Dry up your tears like a good goddaughter, and do as I bid you, and you shall have clothes and horses finer than anyone." Cinderella had heard her father often talk of her godmother, and tell her that she was one of those good fairies who protect children. Her spirits revived, and she wiped away her tears. The fairy took Cinderella by the hand and said, "Now, my dear, go into the garden and fetch me a pumpkin." Cinderella bounded lightly to execute her commands, and returned with one of the finest and largest pumpkins she could meet with. It was as big as a beer barrel, and Cinderella trundled it into the kitchen, wondering what her godmother would do with it. Her godmother took the pumpkin and scooped out the inside of it, leaving nothing but rind. She then struck it with her wand, and it instantly became one of the most elegant gilt carriages ever seen. She next sent Cinderella into the pantry for the mouse-trap, bidding her bring 6 little mice alive, which she would find in the trap. Cinderella hastened to the pantry, and there found the mice as the fairy had said, which she brought to the old lady, who told her to lift up the door of the trap but a little way and very gently, so that only one of the mice might go out at a time. Cinderella raised the mouse-trap door, and as the mice came out one by one, the old woman touched them with her wand, and transformed them into fine, prancing, dapple-gray carriage-horses with long manes and tails, which were tied up with light blue ribbons.